think Keisha's not here. Tanya, we okay to start with 96? Sure. Great. Oh, wait a minute. I got it. Are we live? Great. Welcome, everybody. Today is March 19th. We managed to make it through the Ides of March, and we're all intact. I'm Allison Clarkson. We're here in the Senate, in the State House, in the lounge, and it is the Senate Democratic Caucus. I'm Allison Clarkson. I'm the majority leader, and we are today addressing four big things that are coming up in our crossover period. And we're going to be talking about the privatization contract bill, judicial retention, Proposal 3 to amend the Vermont State Constitution, which gives people the right to collectively bargain. And we're going to have an update on the flavored tobacco bill coming from back to us from the House. So we're going to start with Senator Vyhovsky, who is going to introduce us to the work of Senate GovOps on S96, which is the privatization contract bill. Thank you. And just speak right into it, because then our friend Becca White is here somewhere.
Perfect. So this bill is not an anti-privatization bill. It does not make it impossible for people to create private contracts. What it does do is it redefines a privatization contract. We've heard that currently jobs are being privatized through a loophole in the existing language that this section seeks to close, Section 1, 3 VSA 341. Currently, a real job or employee has to be eliminated. So if the same or similar job is being done with a private contractor, it can be done as long as a real job or employee isn't being eliminated. And what this has led to is places like Reach Up Case Management. There are state workers doing the work, and right alongside them are private contract workers doing the work. Oftentimes they are less familiar and less able to navigate the system. So they will take the call, and then it ultimately makes its way to a state worker who can actually kind of do the work, which is creating issues. We heard from state employees both in Reach Up and in corrections where this is happening. It's also happening in other places, but we had limited time to hear from people, and that it has an impact on the morale of the state workers, kind of always being worried that their job could be privatized, as well as the quality of the service that is being provided to the users. So this seeks to close that loophole by saying if the work is being done by state workers, it all needs to be done by state workers. Section 2, the only change we made in this section is in the introduction. It strikes the words spirit and. So previously the language read that a privatization contract should be certified by the Attorney General if it was not in contrary to the spirit and intent of the classification plan. And it was pretty unclear to us and our legislative counsel what the spirit of meant in this context. So we struck it. So now that it simply reads that it should be certified if it is not in contrary to the intent of the classification structure. This section also lists all the requirements that must be met for a contract, and this is current law, as well as the exceptions. Some of you may have heard from the builders and contractors with concern about how this bill would impact the work they do for the state, and the answer is that it will not impact the work that they do with the state. There are two relevant exceptions to the work that they do that exempt them from this privatization contract requirement. The first is, so this is in Section 2 of the bill. The first exception A, the services are not available within the agency or are of a highly specialized or technical nature, that the necessary knowledge, skills, or expertise is not available within the agency. So state employees do not currently build roads or buildings, and so the specialized skills that the contractors and builders bring would be an exception to this privatization contract bill. The next relevant exception is exception D. The state is not able to provide equipment, materials, facilities, or support services in the location where the services are performed in a cost-effective manner. Again, the state does not have the tools or the employees currently to build roads and bridges, and so that the tools that the contractors and builders bring would be accepted under this provision as well. In the in 3 VSA 343, we've updated some of the requirements for a privatization contract. So currently, there's a 35-day period of consideration. And what we've added is that during this time, the agency shall prepare a written statement about the services being privatized, the proposed cost savings, the wages to be paid to employees, and the benefits that will be offered. And this statement shall be given to the bidder, the agency, and the collective bargaining representative and posted publicly. If the contract is to move forward, here's where we've made some updates. The project should foresee a 20% cost savings. Currently, it is 10%. And it must pay the prevailing state wage rate for the work being done and must offer similar insurance benefits at a similar cost sharing to the state employees plan. It also must meet state quality standards. So if a contract is going to be privatized, it should be because of some new and innovative solution that saves money, not because workers are being paid less or having their benefits slashed or at the expense of the quality of the service. And then this bill also tasks the auditor to yearly review the contracts to ensure that they are continuing to meet the requirements set forth in the bill. If the auditor finds that they are not, the contract should not be renewed. Section 3 is a report from JFO and the Agency of Administration on the fiscal impacts of these changes. So the changes to the definition of what a privatization contract is and the changes to the requirements for what must be met by the privatization contract goes into effect on July 1st, 2025. And this gives us time to hear the report that we've asked JFO and the Agency of Administration to do, and also aligns with the beginning of a new fiscal year, which will allow the administration time to make any changes that they might need to make the requirement, to meet the requirements. There is the small change in section 2, and the requirement for the auditor to review contracts will take effect on passage. And again, this bill does not prohibit privatization contracts, but it asserts that cost savings should not be on the backs of our workers or the quality of the service being provided. And to reiterate, the bill will not have an impact on the builders and contractors under those 2 exceptions that I previously stated. We've also spoken to many different attorneys that agree with this interpretation. So I just wanted to kind of lay out the basics of what the bill does and answer some questions that some of you may have heard. And I'm also happy to answer additional questions now.
Senator, 2 questions. If you just yeah.
Thanks. All right. I have 2 questions. One is the $25,000 level that is in the bill, and then 2, the concern about Davis-Bacon. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So the $25,000 that is in the bill is current law. So that is not changing at all. The concerns about Davis-Bacon, I am less familiar with, but I can definitely get you an answer.
I think that would be helpful because I've heard that from a couple of folks.
Okay.
And that it might undermine what we currently have. So the 25,000, thank you for that. Now I get that. The other one would be helpful.
Yep.
Senator Kitchell.
Does the bill differentiate between a contract, which usually goes out for an RFP, a bidding process, and a grant? For example, you use the reach up, but for example, in child welfare, we do a lot, I think, through Easter Seals and through other organizations that work with Family Services Division. And I don't know, I don't think they necessarily go out to bid. So are we, and oftentimes those relationships are really important to get that broader community participation and have greater resources. So does this cover grants as well?
It does cover grants as well, but again, it doesn't apply if it is work that the state is not currently doing. So I know a lot of the contracts we have with nonprofits, they're doing work that our state employees don't do.
That may be true, but the argument could be made if you had state employees, they could perform that function. So when you're getting into family services, casework, social work, et cetera, that becomes a very gray delineation between do you have the positions or not, and you're contracting. So I'm just trying to anticipate some of these fine lines that are going to come here, which could have very significant implications for some of those services that are provided to the state.
I'm going to let Senator Hardy weigh in.
Thank you, senators. I two things. First about Davis-Bacon, and then I'll answer Senator Kitchell's. Davis-Bacon is, the bill says prevailing wage in it, that it has to be equivalent to the prevailing wage. So I don't think it would interfere with Davis-Bacon because the Davis-Bacon wages would be the prevailing wage. So it doesn't specify a certain wage rate. It just is the prevailing wage for the classification of the employee. But we can double check with our attorney on that. And in terms of your question, Senator Kitchell, I think one of the reasons that we put the sort of report back from the administration, and they would report back next January to the GovOps committees and the appropriations committees on the fiscal and operational impacts of the change in the definition and the change in the savings rates. So to get at that very question and other questions about what the impacts may be. So there's a delayed effective date for the changes until after, for those changes and including the definition that now would include the grants in it. So we'll get a report back on what the implications are. So if there are bigger implications, we could certainly come back on the definition or change the definition a little bit. Does that help at all? Your processing.
Does that answer the sequencing question that we'll be doing it after?
Well, it wouldn't go into effect until after we get the analysis. I mean, which is so we would have the full, whoever we are in the future would have the full session to make changes after getting the report.
Okay. Keisha.
I just want to say, I read over this today in the calendar. This does have a lot of economic and labor implications. I don't think we want to hold up the bill. I think I will speak for myself. I'd like economic development to be added to the final report back section. That would be great. So I don't know if I should work with you on an amendment or something like that. Sure. Okay. Okay. If that's considered friendly, especially some of the Davis-Bacon questions and some of the other labor issues that are specifically coming up, we would. But again, I don't want to hold up the bill. Okay. Yep.
Here you go.
Thank you so much. Senator Gulick, LaRock Gulick here. Quick question. I have heard from some folks who think that this bill has moved a little too quickly and that there hasn't been ample testimony taken on it. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, the bill did move somewhat quickly given the sort of crossover deadline. And we know that, there's a whole additional half of the session for the bill to be worked on in the House. So we did want to move it. It's been, I think this is the 6th or 7th session this bill has been introduced. So it certainly has had plenty of time for people to look at it, if not this session. And we did take testimony from anyone who asked to come in and testify. We did hear from the administration, who then subsequently did not wish to come back in to offer amendments to the bill. So we really did try to open the door to anyone who wanted to come testify and work with us to make this bill something that worked for them. We were here until I think 5:30 on Friday, and this is the only bill we worked on. So yes, it moved somewhat quickly, but I do think the committee gave it due diligence and due time in the limited time structure we had. And we do have a whole half of a session for additional people to be heard in the House.
Great. Then thank you very much. I think staying on our labor theme, as soon as Senator Ram Hinsdale finishes chewing, we're going to pivot to our next labor consideration, which is Proposal 3. We have a one-page handout on the back table, and looking at the back table, we just want to thank Senator Chittenden for an amazing array of sugary treats that we are all enjoying, and thank you. Thank you, thank you.
It is rude that you have the best snacks on the day I'm Zooming. Just saying.
I know.
Very rude.
So Becca is bemoaning the fact this is being presented on the day she's not here. Anyway, we'll save some for you. I am giving you Senator Brahms.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things. Senator Harrison is going to report this constitutional amendment on the floor. We plan to vote it out tomorrow. And tomorrow at noon, there is also a press conference with labor leaders and members of our committee. I believe in the Cedar Creek room. I'll let you know otherwise, but anyone should feel free to attend. So back to the actual content. I mean, I would say this is one of our committee's first times ushering a constitutional amendment through the beginning of its process. I would philosophically say constitutional amendments are reserved for issues where there's very clearly one side or the other that we're coming down on, and that this particular right is potentially under attack beyond our borders. Yeah, that sounded very dramatic, but the National Labor Relations Board, the very question of its existence is under scrutiny and is likely to go to the Supreme Court in a case that Amazon is a part of. And so, right now, without as much of a top headline as, say, reproductive rights, labor organizing is under very strong threat nationally. At the same time, I think we often try to remind our colleagues and ourselves as the Labor Committee that we as Democrats care about income inequality, livable wages, workplace equity, workplace quality of life, health and safety standards. And we usually don't get to directly impact those issues. The way we best do that is to empower collective bargaining and unions to take those issues on. I don't have to go through the 5-day work week, a number of other provisions that unions have fought for that then have benefited the rest of the workforce. And unions have some of our greatest equity in terms of who's at the table, who's in leadership, and how they bring people into the workforce. In fact, our own minority leader, who may or may not vote for the bill tomorrow, wanted to start his remarks by saying that his own grandfather would probably not likely have gotten a job in a well-paying industry with benefits as a Black man if it wasn't for unions. And so he wanted to start by thanking unions for what they've done in the past. I don't think I have to go through how unions are under attack right now and how they're also seeing a resurgence of support. One of our most recent examples of union organizing in the state were the lowest paid workers at UVM Medical Center. I will just say I went and spoke on behalf of their union organizing effort, as well as their effort to get $20 as a base wage. And, that deeply impacted the environmental services, custodial services staff there. I wouldn't have had a 3-week hospital stay that was as successful if the environmental services staff were not there taking care of me, cleaning my room every day, making sure I didn't get an infection that would affect Mira. So, we have very live debates going on right now about who should be able to organize and what how their employer should react to that. This language, pretty much exactly, except stylistically, as we just heard from our ledge counsel around, we have an older constitution, for example, than Illinois that has passed this. So aside from any stylistic differences, this is the exact language that exists in Illinois' constitutional amendment they passed in 2022. In its mirroring of that language, there's one change from the amendment as introduced by Senator Hashim and 19 other people. And that change is that the language about agency fees was struck. That is believed to be unconstitutional and just pretty problematic and controversial. So that's gone. Everything else you see in there, it might be confusing to look at, especially the second sentence, but it's very specifically worded language that makes us essentially the opposite of a right to work state. So many states are now coming down on the side of, are we a right to work state, or are we a state that believes in union organizing and collective bargaining as a fundamental right? There are 9 right to work states. We would be the second state to put in a right to labor and organize in our constitution, and Pennsylvania is also considering the exact same language. California did something kind of similar, but it's California and we're not going to do what they did. But that's another big state that has similar principles that they've embedded in statute as well. So that's kind of where we are with it. If it gets voted out on Wednesday, and again, it doesn't have to make the same crossover conditions because it's a constitutional amendment, but we want to still advance it in time for the House to consider it. It would, if it passes both chambers, it's then up for a vote by the public in November of 2026. I think this is
next biennium. It has to go through
yes,
chambers.
but because we're doing it all the second year, often we think it's like a 4-year process, but it would go through both chambers. If it goes through both chambers again next time it goes through our full legislative process, we're still looking at a 2-year horizon, not a 4-year horizon, because we're trying to achieve this in the second year of the biennium. So November of 2026, which tends to not be as good of a year for Democrats as the years when we have a national presidential race. So I think this would be a bright spot that people can look forward to voting on a issue of national importance. Questions? Senator Gould. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. Where's our second mic? I'm just curious where it is.
It's on the table, Allison.
She's on Crow.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that presentation. I believe I signed on to this, so I think it's a good idea. I also signed on to another constitutional amendment bill that didn't move, and so I'm concerned that there seem to be some folks in the caucus who don't like to change the Constitution. So I'm wondering how we're going to approach this as a caucus to get something to move. If there's a strategy, or are we just hoping that folks will support this?
There's always a strategy. I hope, I believe. The pro tem looks like he wants to say something because, yeah. No one.
Thank you.
We are cognizant that we have a member on the screen who's musical with her mother. Yeah.
So yes, we are vote counting on this, and it looks like a strong vote count. So the strategy is to make sure of those votes and then bring it to the floor. I would say that the last one, it is still a little incomprehensible to me that we weren't able to move it, but we will not have that problem with this particular amendment.
Yeah, I would just like to follow up my
disappointment that we weren't able to. I'm just following up with my disappointment that we weren't able to move the other constitutional amendment that we looked at. So I'm happy about this one, but for the record, thank you very much.
I believe you're referring to the Equal Rights Amendment.
No, Prop 1.
Oh, I'm
Shares.
sorry. Okay, never mind then. I was just going to say, in the broadest sense possible, just as a reminder, I mentioned Senator Brock's story. One of our star witnesses, who I hope is part of our press conference tomorrow, was a woman who basically, is in her 60s, retired, got one of the first jobs in carpentry made available to women in the union, was able to, retire and buy her dream home on the lake, on a lake in southern Vermont, and just, she built it. She built it herself, exactly. So, we just heard a lot of really positive reminders that unions give us economic equality for a lot of different types of people. And so, can't speak to Prop 1 at all, but just wanted to remind folks of that.
Share your disappointment. Any other? Tanya.
I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to say that Prop 4 is still going to come out of committee. We're still working on it and fine tuning the language. Yes.
Okay, I like that.
Thank you, Senator Gulick. I share your disappointment about Prop 1 more than ever. I think this is a great effort that you're making. And since we're talking about unions, I just want to underscore the bill that we just talked about, S96, is the number one priority for our state employee union.
Yes.
That is a union-friendly bill.
Yeah.
And if we're passing this constitutional amendment, we should also be passing that bill, because that bill supports our public employee union for state workers. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that. These are being presented together with precisely that, hopefully that intent. So Any other questions? Are we ready to move quickly to an update on S18? Great. Thank you. Here we go. The reporter of the bill, I give you Senator Gu.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it will be really brief because we have not had a chance to take a look at it since it's been sent out of the House. So we will do that tomorrow with Ledge Council. I can tell you that our position as a committee has not changed. We still support S18. I don't need to remind you of all of the data that exists around tobacco. One being that 95% of addicted adults become addicted before the age of 21. And flavors target children, period. So that is what we're looking at. And we hope that you will all agree. We've been getting a lot of emails from business owners who are really worried about this ban, but we took testimony in our committee that said this has not played out in other states that have banned flavored tobaccos. So keep that in mind as you think about where you're going to stand on S18.
Thank you. And I believe we received some data from the women on my right about its impact on businesses and convenience stores in particular. So perhaps that could be recirculated, or I'm happy to recirculate it. Any questions for Martine on S18? Oh, Andy has one. Oh, not.
Thank you. So we've heard about the cost impact of this. I was also wondering if you could touch on how much we'll potentially save in terms of healthcare costs down the road.
Over 400 million, I think.
Yeah, it's over 400 million. I'm looking at my chair to see if she would like to weigh in. Yeah. Hundreds of millions.
It's hundreds of millions of dollars, let alone the lives that are lost as a result of that addiction. Okay. Any other questions on S18?
Madam
Okay.
Chair, can I ask one thing?
Yes.
I say this sitting in a hospital room with someone with a lung condition largely due to smoking. Period. Just want to say that. Very supportive of this bill. But I do have one question. It seems like I get lots of form emails just randomly throughout the day. Tends to be around 10 a.m. and then at 5 p.m. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what are the tactics that the opposition are using? Where is this coming from? Because it feels like pithy emails and not really written emails, and it feels sporadic and it's a lot. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to the tactics and who and why they're sending them to us at such a volume.
I don't want to go down a major rabbit hole, but one of my Senate colleagues did tell me that she saw that there was a QR code in some stores that all you have to do is put your phone on the QR code and a blast of an email blast goes out. That's one thing. I've been receiving letters, handwritten letters. And again, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it is strange that all of the handwriting looks the same. And then another colleague of mine in the Senate said that he actually reached out to someone that he had received an email from, and that person had no idea what he was talking about. So I'm not exactly sure what the strategies have been, but they do seem maybe a little bit suspect in some cases.
Thank you. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to, Becca, you want to add anything? Okay, great. I'm going to pivot to judicial retention. Actually, one of our greatest responsibilities is retaining our judges. We do not elect them, but we do retain them every 6 years. And we have Senator Collmore and Senator Hardy here. I think they're the key people who are going to, we're going to have Senator McCormick, but he is missing in action. So if you'd be kind enough to give us an umbrella and then talk about the specific people that you're addressing.
Sure.
Great. Terrific.
Well, thank you, Senator
Thanks,
Hardy.
Brian. And
So-
Brian, the camera's there and Becca's there somewhere,
Okay.
but here we are.
So I'll be reporting John Treadwell, who was up for retention and came through with glowing reports from the folks that filled out the survey, both in the other attorney category and the staff and administrative support staff. In fact, he got a unanimous vote from them. This is a gentleman who I was on judicial nominating when he first came up, and he was appointed by the governor in 2017 as a judge for the Vermont Superior Court. So that one is pretty easy. I'll just skip to the other one. And I was hoping to get reports. Senator McCormick had asked that each of the other two reporters just give me sort of a capsule view of the other two. Unfortunately, I didn't get those, so I don't know much more than to tell you what the vote was. Yeah, I'll do Peterson first. He's the magistrate that Representative Tom Oliver from the House will be reporting. And that one was a pretty clear. In fact, he had shutouts. I call them shutouts. If you get a unanimous vote out of both the other attorneys and the staff, to me, that's a shutout. It's a nice shutout if you're a pitcher. So he'll be reporting him. And then Senator Hardy was going to do Judge Warren. And there was initially apparently the appearance of an issue with Judge Warren, but in the end it wasn't, right?
So Judge Lisa Warren, there were some concerns at the beginning, but she addressed them beautifully in front of the Judicial Retention Committee. She presented herself really well. Her documentation and her file was excellent. The reason I'm reporting her on the floor is because there was an article in the Caledonia Record saying that I was holding up her retention. It was wrong. It was what made Senator Benning return to the State House to talk to me about it. So I even got Joe back in the House to talk about it. But I'm reporting her retention on the floor. I think she did a great job, and the Caledonia Record article was incorrect. I wasn't able to read it because it was behind a paywall, though. So, but anyway, I think all three judges did really well, and there are no issues, unlike last year. So should be easy.
Yeah, the Joint Retention Committee voted 8-0-0 in all three cases to recommend retention of those judges for another 6 years. So
That's terrific.
that's it.
That's great. And we're going to be meeting next Tuesday after the floor. I think we're meeting at 10:30. Is that right?
10 or 10:30.
In joint assembly. And thank you. I just want to do a big shout out, speaking of shout outs, to our Judicial Retention Committee, because it's long hours, and last year in particular it was super long hours, and we're really grateful. You carry a lot of water for all the rest of us, and we're very grateful to you for that work. So thank you. Anything else anybody wants to chat about in caucus before we adjourn? Senator Brett.
There's a couple of bills we haven't really talked about. I think they're not particularly controversial. One is if we revise the extended producer responsibility for batteries to incorporate rechargeable batteries, which weren't really much in circulation when we did the original bill 8 years ago.
Remind us of other extended producer responsibility bills we've already passed.
Yeah, so we do for mercury and things like thermostats and light bulbs. We do paint and electronic waste. So this is basically if you're the source of this challenging thing to deal with in the waste stream, you end up having a responsibility to help us handle it well. And the other thing is, just very briefly, we've had since the 90s residential building energy standards, best kept secret that they're law. And so we're trying to improve the implementation and use of those standards. And that's in another bill. It advances, for anyone who worries about it, it advances the work in terms of a study group and some modest changes. But it is going to be a long-term transition until it's a fully fledged program.
Terrific. And that's
Senator Bray knew I might want to say, I flagged that one today too. I think we would like for it to be passed over and to have a conversation with you in our committee about it, since it affects the cost of residential housing, and we want to be part of it.
All right. So schedule me in. It's on our calendar.
Yes.
okay, great. Seeing no other questions or concerns, I'm going to adjourn us. Thank you all very much.